Welcome back to Suit and Boot. Before I begin, I want to be very, very clear. What I'm about to say, it is my lived experience. These are my dynamics. This is how they impacted me, how it impacted my body, my relationships, and my life. This, again, my experiences. I'm not diagnosing anyone. I'm not telling anyone else's story for them. I'm telling mine. Welcome to Suit and Boot, standing up in true transformation and breaking out of trauma. My name is Tshai, right? And we're here once again to talk about trauma and how we get over it. Most people think trauma is one moment, one betrayal, one argument, one explosion. But for people like myself and many of us, trauma wasn't an event, it was a system. If you've been listening to the podcast from the beginning, you'll remember that I said I'm breaking out of a family system. And now it's a system where no one stepped in. Okay? A system where no one protected. And it's a system where silence was expected and endurance was praised. When a child grows up without protection, that child does not grow up free. That child grows up adaptive. Now, adaptation looks like strength to most people and, of course, to the adults. If you're adapting, it's like, oh my God, she's so strong. Oh, look at her. She can do anything. She doesn't need any help. And it also looks like you're so mature. This little girl or this little boy is so mature. And you think, oh, my kid can do anything. It also looked like competence. But it's none of these things. It's survival. Now, sometimes the unprotected child isn't just neglected. She's scapegoated. She becomes an emotional container for the family. She's the one that is blamed when tension rises, the one that is labeled too sensitive, too dramatic, or too difficult. Not because she's those things, but because someone else does not want to hold their own pain. The scapegoated child learns if something goes wrong, it must be me. Now, me growing up, being a scapegoated child, it was lonely and, the house was full of people all the time. But the scapegoated child, learns early that everything is their fault. I learned early that everything is my fault. I become hyper aware. I'm assessing the situation. I'm looking around and making sure everything is okay, everything is safe. But nothing is ever safe, right? I'm reading moods. I'm anticipating reaction. And I learned to adjust myself to keep the system stable. And slowly, quietly, that belief moves from thought to identity. But here is where it becomes even more dangerous. Sometimes the child is not placed into that one role. Like I was never a scapegoated child. I was placed into several roles. I was the scapegoater. I was the fixer. I was the golden girl. I was everything all at once for everybody else. Now, when a child is placed into dueling roles or competing roles at the same time, for example, like I just said, the scapegoat and the golden girl, she's criticized, she's relied upon, she's blamed, and she's praised. And as I said earlier, one moment she's so mature, she's so capable, she's my little, woman. She doesn't need any help. She doesn't need anyone to help her with anything. So she gets ignored. She's so mature. She's so capable. She's the responsible one. And that really serves the adults very well because they don't even have to pay attention to that child because that child is strong. That child can do everything on their own. So everything, it's like, oh yeah, my very strong capable. So I don't have to pay attention to them. Now that responsible one, the next moment when it's convenient, that responsible child also becomes the problem. That child also becomes too emotional. She's overreacting. There is no stability, no consistency, nothing that tells the child that this is what they should do. So that child learns that love is conditional and approval is temporary and safety depends on her performance, how well she does. how that is how she's going to be accepted into this system, into this family, right? How good she does at whatever role she's been given. And what that eventually does is she doesn't learn who she is. She learns who she needs to be for everybody else. Now, from that environment, we get a people pleaser, and alongside her, the fixer, right? Now, people pleasing is just another dangerous role because this is where you lose yourself. The adults in your life are the ones that you try to fix whatever they need, because here we go again. You are adapting to every situation because this is your for safety. If I help, I'm safe. If I solve problems, I matter. And this is just such a role that I picked up on early, about nine, and if I carry everyone else's pain and trauma, I won't be abandoned. I became emotionally competent very, very early. I mediated adult conflict. When I say she, this is if you have experienced this. She regulates other people's emotions, and the family, the system praises all of this because they're getting their needs met. They're going to call her strong. They're going to call her the glue. They're going to say, she holds everybody together. But what they're really, really saying, the message they're really sending is we're comfortable letting her carry what we refuse. And the objective we hear are the adults, the ones that are designed to be the protection and the safety, the ones that are supposed to be the mirror for us. Now, the fixer is not supported. There's no support system for the fixer. She's basically used. So everyone comes to her for solving all the problems. Give me your problems. Nobody asks her how she's doing. And that creates a dangerous belief for that fixer that my worth comes from saving everybody else. Now, that's not the end of it. Let's add another layer, right? Sometimes the person who does not protect the child is also an unhealed child themselves. So these are the adults I'm talking about. They're sometimes unhealed. They have their own traumas that they didn't resolve from childhood. And so they bring that over. So sometimes the mother specifically carries her own abandonment wounds, her own unmet needs, her own unresolved jealousy. Yes, I said unresolved jealousy. And this is not intentional because this is not about blame. This is not about finger pointing that we're doing here. This is just pattern recognition. And so, because of this jealousy, when a father gives a daughter attention or affection or protection, and that's something pretty healthy that a dad is supposed to give a little girl protection and safety. That's what a little girl wants from her daddy, right? But that protection, that safety, that attention that daddy's giving that little girl, that can trigger the mother's unhealed wound. Again, unintentional. But these are just traumatic patterns. These are just generational cycles. Now, the daughter becomes a mirror, a reminder of mom's youth, of mom's worth, of attention mom never received. And instead of protection, the child experiences competition from mom. And again, as I said, this is not always consciously, because remember, mom is dealing with her own traumas. She's dealing with her own, patterns of childhood inconsistencies, right? Now, it's not, again, not malicious, but consistently enough, that child feels it. It's happening over and over and over. The mom may minimize her pain. She might invalidate the child's pain, invalidate her experiences altogether, kind of gaslight that child. And of course, we don't even know the name gaslighting as a child. We don't know that what's happening. So we're trying to align. And again, mom might align with another sibling to undermine that child's confidence, right? And it gets even trickier and more wrapped up if the sibling is a step sibling or a half sibling, especially with different fathers. The system fractures even further. So when then there's another, when it's like a daughter and, it's a different father, it's like the system is so broken, so fractured that how do we repair it without the family system? because there are loyalties that are bind. They're invisible hierarchies, unspoken rules. Nobody knows these rules, but the rules are there. So what did I learn and what most children learn in those situations? My needs cause problems. My presence creates tension. So what do we do? And what does the brain tell us to do? I should shrink. I should make myself smaller. Okay. And so that unprotected, scapegoated, role confusion, confused little girl grows up, right? She becomes a woman who overgives, over explains, over tolerates. And then, well, after all that overgiving, over explaining, over tolerating, she learns to undervalue herself as a person. She stays too long in relationships, situations that are not good for her. She over explains the red flags. She just explains them away, She accepts breadcrumbs and calls it love because she was taught that love requires endurance. You got to stay in it. If you love someone, you got to stay in it no matter what they're giving you, right? So when betrayal happens in adulthood, like for example, infidelity, emotional abandonment, it doesn't just hurt, it confirms what she already believes. I am not worth protecting. And you see these air quotes? Because this is where PTSD forms, because this is the brain telling this little girl this because of the traumas of the past. Okay. So, and the PTSD, it forms, and it's not from one betrayal. It's like a system, a stack of betrayal. That's why it's called betrayal trauma. It's in that lifetime, but from a lifetime of unprotected moments. Just like I said, not from one instance or one betrayal. It's a lifetime of unprotected moments stacking on top of each other. And that little girl, we're going to talk about her system. Now, let's talk about the other side of it, the wounded boy. Sometimes he, too, was placed into the fixer role. He may have emotionally supported his mom. He was expected to be the man. And I'm putting quotes again and using air quotes because a little boy at 7, 8, 10, he's the little man of the house way too early. And so what does he learn? His needs are last and mommy's needs come first, especially if that's a single mom. That's very key. It's a very important key. He learns my value comes from being needed. My emotions are secondary. I exist to manage other people's pain. But there's a difference with the boy and the girl. The little boy, the little fixer boy, and the little fixer girl. Big, big difference. Because unlike the girl, the boy's fixing often shows up as avoidance, and it's disguised as like, "Oh, he's so responsible, he's a little man." But he's only growing up to do those things like do the physical work around the house, take care of mom. He shows up practically, so to speak, but emotionally, he disconnects because he was never taught how to stay present with vulnerability. Love feels overwhelming. Needs feel dangerous. So when intimacy deepens, he escapes. He runs. He uses flight mode. Or sometimes he fights, right? And the part we don't talk about enough. What happens after the fixer wakes up? Because people think healing is relief. But for fixers, healing is disorienting. When you've spent your entire life managing other people's emotions, fixing problems that were never yours, and being valued for how much you carry, silence feels unsafe. Rest feels wrong. Peace feels unfamiliar. The fixer doesn't just lose relationships when she heals. She loses her identity. Because if I'm not fixing, if I'm not holding everything together, if I'm not anticipating everyone's needs, then who am I? And that question alone can trigger grief, anxiety, and fear. Fixers are often told, "You're so strong. You're so independent. You don't need anyone. But what no one says is you were strong because you had no choice. And when you stop fixing, people don't clap. They're not like, good job. Stop the fixing. Stop the people pleasing. No, they panic because the system depended on your self abandonment. This is why healing often comes with a backlash. This is what the families and part of that system that they were benefiting from when they start to say, you've changed, you're selfish now, you're cold, you're not the same. What they're really meaning and what they're really saying is that you are no longer doing the emotional labor for us. And this is where many women, especially scapegoated fixers, start to doubt themselves again. They think, am I the problem? Am I overreacting? Am I abandoning people? No, you're withdrawing from a role that was never yours. The wounded boy experiences differently. When he stops fixing, he often feels exposed because fixing was how he avoided feeling. So when the fixer role drops, what's left is grief, anger, and fear he never learned how to process. Nobody taught him. This, in my experience, and based on what I've learned, this is why many men numb out. They detach or escape when real emotional work begins. Healing feels like danger to a nervous system trained in survival. And here's the truth most people won't say. Two people healing at the same time doesn't always save the relationship. Sometimes it ends it because healing removes the roles that kept the relationship functional but unsafe. When the fixer stops fixing and the avoider is asked to show up, the illusion collapses. I experienced a lot of collapsed illusion because I was in a 32-year cycle. And this doesn't mean the healing was wrong. It means the relationship was built on roles, not reciprocity. And roles cannot sustain intimacy. For the scapegoated fixer, awakening often brings mourning. And we mourn our childhood in all honesty. That's just one of the biggest things that we really and truly mourn. We mourn the childhood that we didn't have. We didn't have the protection and the version of us that survived at great cost. And grieving that's not linear. Some days you feel powerful, other days you feel untethered. That doesn't mean you're regressing. It means your nervous system is recalibrating. Healing is learning how to receive without earning, how to rest without guilt, how to say, that's not mine. I'm not carrying that. I don't need to prove my worth today. And that is terrifying until it becomes freeing. This is why breaking generational trauma is not a glow up. It's a reckoning. It's choosing truth over belonging, integrity over approval, self-protection over self-erasure. And not everyone will come with you. But if you're listening to this and you feel lonely in your healing, I want you to hear this clearly. You're not failing. You're transitioning out of survival, and that takes time. This is the work of SUITT and BOOT, standing up in truth, transformation, and breaking out of trauma. We're not just understanding the past, but we're choosing differently moving forward. So again, you're not failing. You're standing up in your truth and your transformation. Now imagine this, a woman who was a scapegoated child, a golden child, people pleaser, and a fixer, because these are all the roles that, this little girl that I spoke about earlier has all these, titles. She wears all these hats, right? Now she meets a man who I just spoke about, the wounded man into the fixer role, but he was never emotionally nurtured. Two of them meet, the two of them get together, and at first, it feels like magic. It feels like chemistry. It feels like they understand each other. Sometimes it's like a look that you don't even have to speak, but I know what he's saying. And it just feels so familiar. It feels like we were meant to be. It's a love. It's kismet. Romeo and Juliet. We were meant to be. That thing feel familiar because they bond over survival. But underneath that bond, there's a huge problem because neither of them learned how to be emotionally held. They never learned how to ask for help, how to receive care without earning it. So the boy and the girl are going to do things and look how they're going to play against each other, right? She's going to overfunction while he underfunctions, right? Because if she's giving 80%, he's only going to give 20 because he doesn't need to do anything else, right? So of course he's going to underfunction. And then once he starts underfunctioning, she tries harder because she's a fixer, remember? And then when she tries harder, he starts pulling away. And then she blames herself. And then he goes back to avoiding accountability. And when the stress hits, betrayal, family interference, the pressure, that system collapses altogether because fixers like myself don't know how to rest and they don't know how to receive love. And then another dynamic comes in. This dynamic is the worst of them all, right? The parents. You remember those parents I talked about earlier? The ones with unhealed wounds and unresolved issues, unprocessed jealousy. And think about a mother-in-law who competes instead of supports, who inserts herself instead of stepping back and letting her son be a man and resolving the issues on his own, right? Instead of stepping back, her son makes a mistake. He does something wrong. She aligns with him in his, bad behavior. Again, this is not about blame. Instead of protecting the marriage, she aligns with the son. And then in this system, that daughter-in-law is again becoming that scapegoat because she is essentially blamed for the marriage problems. Her pain is dismissed. Her reactions are weaponized. So whatever reaction she has, it is not because something misbehavior happened or some bad behavior happened, betrayal or breaking of the marriage vows occurred. No, everything that she does is weaponized or she shouldn't have done that. Now, in those moments, she's not just reliving her childhood trauma. She is reenacting that childhood within that marriage. And if you take a look at it, that marriage has no protection. No one is supporting that marriage, okay? Because now it's falling apart. There's no foundation, no protection, no boundaries. And this is the big kicker. No elder wisdom. There's no older person. There's no mom. There's no dad that's healed and ready. There's no community holding that marriage together. Let me tell you, that marriage never stood a chance. Not because there was no love, but because every system around it was fractured. The higher ups, the older ones, the unhealed parents, both mom and dad, that generational trauma, everything is just fractured. Now, this is how generational trauma works, right? Just exactly what I've been talking about. And this, as I said, is an example of my experience and what I went through, right? Unhealed parents create unprotected children. Unprotected children form survival-based relationships, okay? There's no way that those kind of children who are unprotected, they're going to form good relationships that are healthy. They're going to form survival-based relationships. And those relationships are going to fracture at the least, at the easy, as the quickest sign of any type of trauma. It's just going to fracture. And the cycle repeats unless someone stops it, unless someone tells the truth, unless someone refuses to keep carrying what was never theirs. It's not my baggage. And in Jamaica, we used to say, it out of my basket for carry. It was not my basket to carry, right? And so I'm refusing to carrying what was never mine to carry. This is why I created Suit and Boot, standing up in truth and transformation and breaking out of trauma. And specifically, this generational trauma is so interwoven because we can't create healed marriages without healed people. You heard what I said. We cannot create healed marriages without healed people. We cannot raise healed men without emotionally nurturing our boys. We cannot raise healed women without protecting our little girls. And we cannot end generational trauma if we refuse to look at where it started. We have to look at the genesis. Breaking cycles means ending role confusion, ending scapegoating, ending the belief that love requires self-erasure. You don't have to lose yourself to be in love. You have your own identity and your significant other has theirs. You do not have to lose yourself. And I keep repeating this because this is so important, because people think when I get into a relationship, I have to start cooking and I have to start cleaning and all of these roles, whether it's gender roles or systematic roles. Now, if you're listening to this and you're recognizing yourself, just think about this and listen to me carefully. You're not broken. You're not broken. You're waking up. You may be the one who sees the pattern, the one who feels the weight, the one who chooses differently. You're the cycle breaker. You are the breaker, and the cycle ends with you. The cycle ends with us. Now, you've been listening to Suit and Boot, standing up in truth, transformation, and breaking out of trauma. Now, if this episode resonated with you, please write down your thoughts and your feelings in a journal or in poetry or something. You need to have a way to release trauma, because trauma does not escape and trauma does not end until we break the cycle. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching and standing up in truth and transformation and breaking out of trauma. From Scorpion to Eagle to Phoenix.